This is CityCast Philly. I'm Trenae Nuri, and here's what Philly's talking about. As soon as my server asks me, can I get you started off with any drinks? I'm going to ask for water. I'm fine with tap water on ice. I brush my teeth with it. I wash my hair. I wash my clothes with it. But I've been seeing all these headlines about stuff in Philly's tap water. Christine, what's in our water and is it safe?
That's a great question, Trenae. Thanks for having me on. The Philadelphia drinking water is really regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act, and it meets federal standards. What's interesting is a lot of people reach for bottled water. Bottled water is a food product, so it's regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. It's not regularly tested and things like that. Versus our tap water is regulated by the Safe Drinking Water Act under the EPA through the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. And we have to get publicly available reports about that quality of the drinking water. So you don't get that with bottled water, you get it with your tap water. And so, yes, I would say, that Philly water meets federal standards. So to the extent that those federal standards cover the contaminants that we need to worry about, then that water is safe to drink. But, we'll talk more, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's Christine Kirchhoff, Associate Professor of Civil and Environmental Engineering and Law Policy and Engineering at Penn State University. Where is my tap water coming from? And is West Philly drinking the same water that South Philly is drinking?
That's a good question. So this is where my not being a native Pennsylvania comes in. The Schuylkill.
Oh, you're going to teach me some water stuff, and I'm going to teach you how to talk Philadelphia.
Thank you. So the Schuylkill and the Delaware River are the main sources, and there are multiple treatment plants. So part of what I saw when I looked at the Philadelphia Water Department's website, they go through, where does your drinking water come from? Where are the sources? How many plants are there? So there's a couple of different plants. And they blend the water. And so, but where, a specific exit from the treatment plant might be in one part of the city, a different plant might be serving, a different part of Philly. And then, but all that water kind of comes together in the distribution system. So at some point, they're more blended than separate, if that makes sense.
Got you. And I've seen things that said, we should run the tap water every morning before brushing our teeth, showering, or even cooking.
So there is a website. I would encourage, you and your listeners to look at the Philadelphia Water Department's website on lead service lines. So all the part of the federal regulations around lead require that water systems define where their lead service lines are. So and the bigger systems will have this publicly available in these websites. So you can see if your neighborhood is is served by lead service lines or not. So not everywhere has lead service lines, but then there's more concentrated in some parts of the city than others. And if you do have lead service lines, then running that, flushing your pipes is a good idea. So lead comes from two sources. Let's be clear about that. One is these lead service lines, which are legacies, part of how we built water systems back in the day. We know better now, but that was the material that was in common use early on. And those take from the water main in like a street, in your street. And the service line is what tees into that water main and comes towards your house. So that service line can be lead in some cases, but then other source of lead would be inside the home. So if you have an older home from pre-1986, you were allowed to build those homes. It used to be the case that we would have lead in the fixtures. So in the valves, when you turn on your water, there's a valve that opens and closes. Other parts of your pipes within your house might have these lead in the fixtures. Again, it was common practice. We didn't, know not to do that back in the day. But since 86, there was no more new lead fixtures could be in. And then by 2014, whatever remaining lead was out. So if you have a lead service line, you need to run the water a little bit longer because you're trying to get it all the way out from that lead service line and through your pipes in your house. If the concern is primarily within the house, then you're trying to flush out whatever is sort of stagnant water overnight from within the pipes in your home, if you're concerned about lead fixtures. But any of that, the water department also offers free testing. So you could, test from different parts of your house. You could, first thing in the morning, test a pipe in your kitchen or test a pipe in your bathroom or test, and certainly it's the drinking that's more important than the brushing of teeth or showering.
Interesting. If I do suspect something is wrong or a bit off with my water, who should I call first? Is it the water department? Is it 311, 911? Should I tweet the mayor?
That's a good question. So if you see like a main break, like there's water bubbling out in the street or a fire, something's wrong with the fire suppression system, et cetera, in the street, that's, I think, when you would call 311 or for potholes or things like that. I would say, yes, I would call the water department to see if they can put you in touch with a testing lab or tell you if there's something that they know that's going on in the system that maybe there is an announcement you haven't heard, that kind of thing. So calling the water department, reaching out is a good idea.
Okay, so in the meantime, should we be filtering our drinking water? And does that mean getting something installed under our kitchen sinks or like using one of those Brita filters or something?
Yeah, so we use a Brita filter, a long-last Brita filter. And we initially just used the regular short-acting Brita filters ourselves. And then I did a little digging and realized, well, those short-acting filters don't really remove much, maybe taste and odor, kind of like leftover chlorine, that kind of thing. You need the long-lasting to have the more carbon activation. That's what pulls out things like disinfection byproducts, which sounds technical, but that's what happens when they put chlorine in the water to keep those bacteria and other things from growing inside the piping system. And that's what keeps it, safe over the distribution system. But it might taste unpleasant to people. There's those disinfection byproducts that are potential carcinogens and things like that. Activated carbon filters, like those Brita filters or related products that are pitcher-based, will remove those kinds of things. They also will remove PFAS and other kinds of contaminants from the water. You can install it in a sink. My aunt has one in the sink that she uses for drinking water and for making our coffee and stuff like that. So there's different options, but if you kind of the most accessible is a Brita filter, you could use that. We have also one in our refrigerator that we use for drinking,
But does that sound kind of odd though? Like why do we need all these filters? Because then I'm thinking like, I'm sure, this goes to like a social economic thing. Like if you can't afford these filters, or why should we even have to buy all these filters to begin with?
I'm with you.
Can our water just be clean?
I'm with you. And, I think that we maybe have more concerns about our water if we have young children in the household, if ourselves are pregnant, things like that, or you have other sort of health concerns where maybe having more control over what's coming in your body is just part of how you need to live. I agree. It's not something that we want to advising everybody to have to go spend money on a filter. So I think some of it is, if you can and you have concerns over if for sure you have a lead service lines and you've had your water tested and that there's lead in the water, that's something that we shouldn't be fooling around with because lead accumulates in the body, right? So I'm not saying that you have lead in your water or I have lead in my water, but if you get that water tested and the levels are elevated, it would be prudent to get a filter to, particularly for children who might be drinking that water it has been shown to have developmental effects. And certainly Philadelphia Water Department is on top of this. There's a program to replace the lead service lines throughout the city. They've made good progress in that regard. They offer the free testing so that you can empower yourself and your family, and that works whether you are a homeowner or a renter. That's the same. I think that as consumers, we need to be intelligent consumers. We need to care about what's in our water. I think that it's not to say that the water isn't safe, but I think, again, personally, you know who's living in the house, you know what you're using your water for. And if you can empower yourself with the information about what's in the water, if you need to be worried about it or not, that I think is just more information for you.
All right, we'll talk more water after this break. Okay, so you study this stuff. I'm curious, does Philly's drinking water have a different taste compared to other cities?
That's a great question. I'm not a resident of Philly, so you'll have to tell me if you notice that it tastes different or not. I do know that, it tastes different. I'm in State College, so the water tastes different here than it does in Connecticut, where I used to live. And this is because in State College, unlike in Philly, we take our water from groundwater. So that means that the water is exposed to the geology of the ground. So our water here in State College is really, really, really hard. Hard water, it means it has a lot of mineral content. So hardness is like buffering capacity. I know all this is like sort of technical terms, but it means it has a lot of ions in the water, like calcium +2 or magnesium. And so that means that it can slowly coat the inside of your pipes with a deposit. If you have hard water, you'll notice like your faucet diffuser might get like white buildup on it. That same white buildup is building up on the inside of the pipes too. And, where you are, you're taking water from surface water, so it's going to have more organic matter that they're taking out as part of the drinking water treatment. So the base chemistry, if you will, and geology and environment that water experiences is different than what State College water, drinking water, source water experiences. So I think fundamentally water is water, but you might see a different like minerality to it, or a different, some kind of different taste. Do you think your water tastes good?
I think so.
Yeah.
But I have a water subscription, and I use that water that's like bottled water to cook with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So you prefer sort of that flavor for cooking as opposed to tap water, maybe?
Yes. And also just like things my grandma ingrained in me.
I feel like I want to say, tell me more, but.
Well, okay. Like my grandma said to drink tap water because of fluoride, and the fluoride was good for our teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
Yes. Yeah. So most water systems do dose fluoride into the drinking water. And so if you don't use a fluoride-based toothpaste, you're getting your fluoride from drinking water. In State College, they actually stopped doing it because there's a little bit of controversy depending on how much fluoride is in the water. Certainly too much fluoride can be toxic, but it's the cost. Everything is about sort of benefit cost. And the benefit of having fluoride in the water means that everybody, regardless of socioeconomic status, who's drinking that water, whether or not they have access to a dentist routinely, et cetera, gets that base fluoride to protect the enamel and the teeth. So here in State College now, we have to pay more attention to the fluoride for my son, right? So he uses a fluoride toothpaste. They get fluoride rinses now at the dentist that maybe we wouldn't have done before, but we don't have that in our drinking water now.
Interesting. Why do you like studying this stuff?
A water nerd. So I was a civil engineer, and I like building things. I like understanding things. And I particularly like to understand sort of the science that underpins engineering. like why, why we do things. Whenever we visit, we make sure to spend time by water bodies. I don't know. I've just always been interested in kind of water. And I think drinking water is it's fascinating. And states do things differently. Here in Pennsylvania, we have certain standards for drinking water. Some of them go beyond. So DEP set PFAS standards, which are the forever chemicals, before the federal government did, so why, but Pennsylvania is taking a proactive approach to protecting Pennsylvanians. And then you have the federal government, who is supposed to be protecting everybody through the passage of laws and things like that. But, politics has a role to play, and so it's interesting. And that's, part of my title is Law, Policy, and Engineering. And so I'm very curious about how all these things intersect.
Right. And along with like drinking water, folks do also want to spend time in the water, swimming and playing and kayaking and fishing and things like that. And for our listeners who may be eating breakfast right now, put your bagels down because earlier this month, a report from Penn Environment found high levels of fecal bacteria in the Delaware and Schuylkill rivers and some other Pennsylvania rivers and creeks. You did explain that Philadelphia drinking water is safe, but what about when we do water activities? And why does this keep coming up? Why is there poop bacteria in the water?
Yeah, well, there's poop bacteria in the water because, for a couple of reasons, depending on where you are. But when it rains, and we get harder rains nowadays than we had in the past, that lands on the surrounding landscape and, can run off straight into the stream and can run off through our piping system. And in Philly, you have combined sewers. Same in Pittsburgh has combined sewers. And in fact, small amounts of rain, just above 1/10 of an inch, can trigger overflows in some cases. And so you don't necessarily need a lot of rain to get to wash in fecal matter, bacteria and things like that into nearby rivers and streams. So some of the sources are overland flow of surface water. Maybe there's animal excrement, or maybe there's septic systems that are not well maintained and things like that. Those could be sources, but a good portion of the source is probably the combined sewer overflows. That, again, Philly and other big cities that have these legacy combined systems are working hard to shift to reduce those combined sewer overflows, but it's difficult to completely eliminate them. As we saw with the Paris Olympics, I don't know if you recall.
Ooh, I remember that.
So Paris also has combined sewers, and they spent a lot of money trying to be able to capture the rain that fell and be able to treat it before it went into the river.
And like athletes couldn't go in the river because of high levels of bacteria.
Very similar problem there.
So what can we do as consumers to, push the needle on better water infrastructure so we have good, clean swimming water and good, clean tasting tap water? Because we are, kind of a pun here, we are downstream from the decision makers.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think, so I guess I would say a couple of things. One is, if you are going to recreate in rivers and creeks and things like that, pay attention to the quality. If it's rained recently, if there's any alerts for, do not swim in the water today, take those seriously, because you swim in the water, you have maybe open wounds, or you ingest some of that water, and there are risks, right, of getting infections or things like that. But if it hasn't rained in a while, if there are no alerts, then that would suggest that the river, you can recreate in that. Certainly, boating is different from swimming, right? Because you're boating, you're not in the water itself versus swimming. I think the biggest thing is funding, resources. So taking a combined sewer system and separating those systems and building I know there's a lot of green infrastructure in Philly. So part of that is about trying to handle the rain where it falls and to keep it from getting into the combined system and then overflowing. But all of that takes a lot of resources. And historically, the federal government has been giving states and localities less resources over time. The states, and other places, and it's hard to charge to raise water rates, because then everyone's paying, a lot for water, and with water and food and electricity and everything else going up, it would be difficult. So the challenge, I would say, is having enough resources to fund all the things that matter to us, including our drinking water, our infrastructure. So can we advocate for those, that I think, yeah.
You did explain different filters that we could buy. Are there any other ways that we can clean our drinking water? So
I think, and we talked about this early on, that, is it fair to say everyone should have filtered water, right? Because that's another cost that we have to spend. And I do, Philly Water Department is investing, they're very proactive. They have their own labs. They're, ideally, they are providing safe, high quality drinking water to Philadelphians, and that we, don't have to add those extra filters or do the flushing that we talked about before with, if we have concerns about lead in drinking water. Some of this is that the regulations are slower than what we might, the risks might be. So the regulations for the original contaminants were for bacteria and were for like turbidity and things like that. It was really basic stuff. But we have a lot more chemicals in the environment. We have a lot more things that we might be worried about. And infrastructure is long lasting. So our water plants were built originally to remove certain things. And all of this is to say that, what can we do more? I think invest in our water systems so that they have the resources they need to protect everybody at a level that would be, safe. And then if we have specific concerns because we have legacy lead service lines, or because, we have legacy lead fixtures in our home, then and we can take advantage of the free testing and things like that. I say let's do that, and understand what's in the water in our own homes, and is there a concern there for ourselves or our children or other people in the home, and then make decisions based on that.
Christine, thank you so much for breaking this all down and for joining me on CityCast Philly today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Trenae.
All right, that is all for us today here on CityCast Philly. If you enjoyed this episode about Philly's drinking water, share this with your neighbor. Also, rate the show, leave us a review, and hit that subscribe button. And make sure you are signed up for our morning newsletter so you can learn more about what else Philly's talking about. And don't forget, you can support the show and get great perks by becoming a CityCast Philly neighbor at membership.citycast.fm/Philly. All right, we'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.